All right. Whew. That took a minute. Okay, now we're ready. So I thought we would continue our discussion about handling scope creep. I don't know if it's something you need, or maybe it's just still on my mind from that situation that I told you about last time we talked. But no matter, we're going to talk about scope creep. So scope, let's just start there. Let's start with what the heck scope is. Scope is that parameter, that fence that you draw around your project, that agreement that you come up with your client that outlines exactly what you're going to produce for them and how you're going to do it. So it's got the timelines, it has the deliverables, the meetings, the communication, all of that kind of thing. It sometimes is called a scope of work. Sometimes I call it a statement of work. Let's just call it an SOW. That's the scope of your work. That's the rules of engagement, if you will. So let's talk about what is scope creep. So I don't know how many of you have spent any time in the South, but in the South, we have this lovely invasive vine. It's not lovely. It's called kudzu, and you see it all along the interstate. This probably isn't a picture of kudzu, but this is the closest thing I could find. And it literally takes over the forest, one tree at a time until the entire forest is taken over by kudzu. And I thought that was like a good visual for us. So scope creep then is any additional deliverables, projects, workshops, trainings, anything that goes beyond your agreed upon contract is technically scope creep. So what's the big deal about scope creep? Why do you even care? Because you've got this relationship and you're just like moving on and you're so happy you've got, your contract and you're getting your business moving. Well, why it's important is it can impact the work that you've already agreed upon with your client. So it can affect your timeline. If they add something in, that might push you back. It certainly can affect your budget, leave you less time to do the work you've already agreed upon. And, as we've talked about before, although our clients want to feel like they're our only child, they really aren't our only child. So you've got other things that you've got to balance. So the consequences then is you may not get the work that you needed completed. You'll probably get it completed, but it certainly probably won't be on time. It may not be the quality that you really want to be known for, that becomes part of your brand, and certainly affects your profit and loss on that project. So how do you manage a scope creep? We've talked about this off and on, but I cannot emphasize enough how important it is for you to clearly define your deliverables, exactly what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. And I got to tell you, even after all these years, sometimes I look at my contracts and I'm like, wow, that's not really clear. So this is something that I feel like I'm constantly trying to improve on. I always recommend that you do a kickoff meeting. And in that kickoff meeting, you go through your contract. I mean, not line for line, but you definitely want to look at the dates and the deliverables. And this is a great time to emphasize your participatory approach and expectations of the staff, the different levels of staff. That's a great time to level set their participation. And just to review the things that you have agreed upon, because it may be that you worked with the executive director, but the project manager maybe that you are going to have most contact with doesn't really have that detail. I told you about that situation recently where somebody said, well, what exactly are you supposed to do? They had no clue because they didn't sign the contract. And when we had a kickoff meeting, I didn't follow my own advice. Right. Just, a recent lesson learned for me is go over your scope of work in some detail so that everybody's on the same page about what you're doing. And then this may come as like, why is this in scope creep? But understanding report expectations is pretty important. I was once on a project. I was not the lead evaluator, but I was a sub on this. And when the first report was given to the client, they hated it. They really hated it. I don't think they just hated it because it was 80 something pages long. The content wasn't what they expected. There really was a lack of agreement and understanding about what quarterly reports or what the yearly report would entail. So I find it really helpful. And I actually do this a lot, is to provide like an outline of what I think the report is going to look like. We try to do the 1-3-30 approach that you hear talked about a lot. We try to avoid big, long honking reports. We try to do a lot of PowerPoint, very visual things. But some people really want that more traditional report. So just go ahead and get that out of the way, because you could end up spending a lot of time in draft situations, and that's not fun. All right. And then who's in charge? Think about who's in charge. Like I said, if you signed your contract with the executive director and the staff has no clue what you're supposed to be doing, that's a problem. Or if you have been, this has happened to me before, where you may sign the contract with the muckety muck above, they've pushed you off and then want really nothing to do with the evaluation after that. I usually try to avoid that in the initial conversations by emphasizing that they really need to stay involved and be involved. I'm pretty good at that, but sometimes it happens. But if they're out of the loop, and there's a disconnect with any of the deliverables or dissatisfaction or not an agreement in terms of expectation, you can also get yourself in a world of hurt that way too. So providing status reports is a great thing to do. We're doing this with one client where we're doing quarterly status reports. And what I did is I literally took the deliverables that we had achieved in the first quarter and, said whether or not it was like completed. Most everything was completed. There were a couple of things that were like in progress. And then so it wasn't super wordy. It wasn't really long. And I just provided this as an attachment in an email. You could also do a status report in an email periodically, but you might want to have that conversation too, in terms of how often do they want a status report and what does that look like? Is that a monthly thing? Is that a quarterly thing? That really helps prevent some of the things that we're talking about. And the monthly calls, I always do monthly calls with every single one of my clients. I think there's only one that we have that we just got that's a really small budget that we're probably going to do more like every 6 weeks or so, something like that. But monthly calls are very helpful. You can go through the deliverables and say, okay, we've done this, this, and this. This is what's upcoming. You can talk through any issues at that time. All right, so CYA, you know what that means. I tried to find a picture of a big cow butt here, but couldn't really come up with someone. So we'll just go with CYA. So we talked a little bit about this last time. So in your contract, it's a good idea to say something about kind of head off the pass with the scope creep. So expansion of the scope, and I took this right out of one of my contracts, or extent of this contract beyond the effort outlined in this SOW may be made only through mutual agreement between both parties, insert the name, your company and the client, as evidenced in writing. That might be something you might want to put in. You might want to say something like, work provided outside of this contract will be billed at XXX per hour. So when they come to you and say, hey, gosh, we have this meeting with X funder on such and such a date, or we really want you to do this workshop, that kind of thing, then you can say, hey, I'd be really happy to do that. I think it'll take about X number of hours, and that'll be about, this amount of money. Would you like me to write a contract for that for you? Or, however you want to phrase it, an agreement for you. And then they get that, oh, wow, yeah, I can't just, ask for anything. There's going to be some limits on our relationship. So, if you are in a situation where they want something maybe different than what they've asked for, and I'll give you an example in a minute, or they want to shift the timeline in a significant way that may impact your other work, for example, or impact your work with them, or it may push back data collection, or they want a different service or anything else. You can probably brainstorm what other kinds of things they might want. That should trigger a change order for you. And a change order is simply, it can be very simple. It doesn't have to be full of legalese, but per your request on such and such a date, we agree that we are going to move data collection from this time period to that time period. Or the situation that I had recently was we had proposed some evaluation capacity building training, like a 3-hour workshop and some materials and workbooks and things like that. And somebody new was hired onto the team and really didn't feel like that was going to get what they wanted. So within the hours we had, we came up with a whole different way to address the evaluation capacity. And I got to tell you, at first I was not too pleased. I was not really happy, like, dang, we just signed this contract. But you know what? It really ended up being a win-win. So I gave myself a minute, got over myself, and wrote a change order. We signed it, done. So I wanted us to maybe talk about, when we're together, is it a value added effort that they're asking for, or is it really scope creep? When do you do something for just the sake of your client relationship? And I throw that in there because I am not, I won't tell you that I require a change order for any time the client sneezes and it wasn't, part of the deliverable. That is not how I roll. I mean, we've been helping a couple of long-term clients with some grant proposals they've done. I feel like they don't take advantage of us. I feel like it doesn't take a lot of time to do what they're asking to do versus, a recent request that probably would have taken us, a full day, if not more, to research. So maybe we can have a little bit of a conversation about that. So in the, Matt has inspired me to do this 5.5 tips. So just to kind of review, specify your scope of work, include in it language about what triggers a change order, exactly what's going to happen. Communicate right away if you see a problem. If you've got some of the things that I've recommended in here, you do that kickoff meeting, you do those status reports, you do those monthly calls. Hopefully that's going to head some of this off at the pass. And then really implement that change order. If something has triggered it, you got to do it. You got to put your big people panties on, write that change order and have them sign it and follow through with it. And then review deliverables often, because you want to get a sense of whether or not they're happy. What I find is that I've never gotten a client through my website, but I have a lot of times gotten clients from referral. So it's really important that you protect your reputation as someone who delivers high quality work on time, if not early, and leaves the client very happy. And when all else fails, over communicate, right? I always try to get a sense of what their communication style is, whether or not they prefer emails or phone calls. Some people are just really hating Zoom. That's all part of good client relationships. So, all right, so now it's your turn, and we're going to do a quick check on your goals, because this was something that was requested, and then we'll do, as we always do, something you're proud of and a place where you are stuck.